The warm, heavy air of Memphis pressed down on Graceland, a familiar blanket of humidity that settled deep into Elvis Presley's bones. It was like past midnight, the kind of hour when the world outside the mansion's gates quieted, and the sounds of crickets and distant traffic became the only lullaby. Elvis was restless, as he often was. Sleep didn't always come easy to the king, especially not when his mind was buzzing with new melodies, old worries, or just the sheer weight of being Elvis. He wandered through the house, a grand, sprawling place that was both his sanctuary and his gilded cage. Television room, the pool room, the kitchen, all silent save for the hum of the refrigerator. His family and the guys from the Memphis Mafia, his loyal entourage, were all asleep, or at least they should have been. He liked these quiet moments when the demands of fame faded, and he could just be a man from Tupelo, Mississippi, who loved music and felt a strange, restless yearning in his soul. He found himself on the back patio overlooking the swimming pool, shimmering faintly in the moonlight. The sky was clear, a vast expanse of inky black, peppered with a million sparkling diamonds. Elvis always loved looking at the stars. They made him feel small, yes, but also part of something immense and eternal. He often wondered about them, about what lay beyond, about whether there was life out there, intelligent life watching us. It was a thought that both thrilled and humbled him. He lit a cigarette, the cherry glowing briefly in the darkness, and leaned against a pillar. The quiet was almost profound. Then it happened. At first he thought it was a plane, maybe a commercial jet heading into Memphis International Airport. A light high up, moving steadily. But as he watched, it grew brighter, almost impossibly so, and it wasn't moving in a straight line. It wobbled slightly, then paused, hovering directly above the tree line beyond his property. Elvis squinted, his brow furrowed. That wasn't a plane. Airplanes had blinking lights, they made noise, and they didn't just stop in mid-air like that. This light was a steady, pure white, almost blinding in its intensity. And it was getting closer. His heart began to thump a little faster, a nervous flutter in his chest. Took another drag from his cigarette, trying to calm himself, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a helicopter. But there was no sound, not a whisper of a rotor. Just the gentle hum of the night. The light descended slowly, gracefully, without a single sound. As it dropped below the topmost branches of the oak trees, Elvis could make out a distinct shape behind the brilliance. It wasn't round like a saucer from the B-movies he sometimes watched. It was more triangular, or perhaps boomerang-shaped, with three prominent lights at its points, and the central one pulsing gently. The surface seemed dark matte, absorbing the moonlight rather than reflecting it. It hovered about 100 feet above his property line, directly over the fields behind Graceland, close enough that he could clearly see its form distinct against the backdrop of the night sky. The light wasn't shining at him, but seemed to emanate from within, the craft itself casting a soft, otherworldly glow on the grass below. Elvis felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something far stranger, a profound sense of awe mixed with disbelief. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't a dream. He was wide awake, his senses sharp. He stared, transfixed, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes. The craft didn't move. It just hung there, silent. Impossible. Considered running inside, grabbing a camera, waking someone, but he couldn't move. He was rooted to the spot, lost in the silent, majestic presence above him. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the lights began to dim, not fading out, but retracting, as if drawing inward. The triangular shape became less distinct, then blurred into the night. It didn't shoot off into space. It simply vanished, melting back into the darkness from which it had emerged, leaving only the familiar twinkling stars behind. Elvis stood there, cigarette forgotten in his hand, a plume of smoke curling upwards into the now empty sky, his breath hitched in his throat. He looked around as if expecting someone else to have witnessed it, to confirm he wasn't losing his mind. The mansion was silent. The pool rippled gently. and the crickets chirped on. He was alone with his incredible secret. He finally moved, stumbling back into the house, his heart still hammering. He felt a mixture of exhilaration and confusion. Had he really just seen that UFO right over Graceland? It sounded like something out of a pulp magazine, not real life. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. Who would believe him? He was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. People already thought he was eccentric, buying cars on a whim, practicing karate, riding horses. This would push them past eccentricity right into delusion. Considered waking Joe, Esposito, his friend and road manager, the most level-headed of the guys. But what would he say? "Joe, wake up. I just saw a flying saucer." He could already hear Joe's tired, polite skepticism. Elvis ended up in his bedroom, sitting on the edge of his bed, the silence of the room amplifying the ringing in his ears. The image of the silent glowing triangle was burned into his mind. It felt so real, so undeniable. Yet, a part of him still wrestled with the absurdity of it all. Had he imagined it? Was he overtired? But the feeling, the sheer undeniable presence, lingered. He felt changed by it, touched by something profoundly mysterious. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, the stars outside his window suddenly seeming much closer, much more significant. He knew deep down that his night had been anything but ordinary. The next morning, the Memphis sun beat down relentlessly, making the previous night's reveal encounter feel like a hazy dream. Elvis sat at the breakfast table, pushing scrambled eggs around on his plate. Vernon, his father, was reading the newspaper, occasionally grunting about politics or property taxes. Priscilla, his wife, was talking softly with a housemaid about flower arrangements. Everything was normal, too normal. Elvis tried to engage in the usual banter, tried to laugh at Joe Esposito's latest joke, but his mind kept drifting back to the silent triangle. Hovering over his backyard, he felt a peculiar mix of longing and unease. Was it gone for good? Would it return? More importantly, should he even tell anyone? Later that morning, he called Joe into the jungle room, a place where they often had their serious talks, surrounded by green shag carpet and exotic carved wood. Joe, ever loyal and pragmatic, listened patiently, his arms crossed over his chest, a slight frown on his face. "Joe," Elvis began, his voice low, "something strange happened last night. Real strange." Joe nodded, waiting. He'd heard Elvis talk about everything from spiritual visions to peculiar dreams. He knew how creative and sometimes prone to exaggeration the king could be. "I was out on the back patio late after everyone was asleep," Elvis continued, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "And I saw it, Joe, clear as day. A UFO." Joe blinked. He suppressed a sigh. UFO EP. You sure you weren't just tired, or maybe one of the boys was fooling around with a drone or something?" Elvis shook his head vehemently. "No, Joe. This wasn't no drone. It was big, triangular. No sound, just hung there, glowing. Then it just vanished." He described it in detail. The silent descent, the three lights, the dark matte surface. Joe listened, his expression unwavering. He was Elvis's right-hand man, his confidant. He knew better than to dismiss Elvis outright. Even if the story sounded outlandish. "So you're saying aliens EP little green men?" Joe even managed a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. "I don't know what it was, Joe," Elvis said, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "But it wasn't from here." "I know it wasn't. It felt powerful, like it was watching." Joe nodded slowly. "All right, EP, I believe you think you saw something. Could be a new military plane. Experimental stuff. They're flying out of Millington. They got all kinds of crazy prototypes out there." He was trying to offer a logical explanation to ground Elvis. Elvis slumped back against the green velvet cushions. He knew Joe was trying to be helpful, but the explanation felt hollow. What he'd seen was unlike anything from this world. "Maybe," he mumbled, though he didn't believe it for a second. "Look," Joe said, sensing Elvis's disappointment, "you've been working hard, EP. Maybe you just need some rest. I'll tell the boys to keep an eye out tonight, just in case you want to watch the stars again." Joe wasn't committing to the UFO, but he was committing to keeping Elvis company, to being vigilant for his boss. That was Joe. Elvis appreciated the sentiment, but he felt a pang of loneliness. He had seen something extraordinary, and it was hard to share the weight of it. That evening, a subtle shift occurred. Joe, true to his word, found himself lingering outside. A little longer than usual. He wasn't looking for UFOs. Not really. He was just doing his duty, keeping watch over Graceland, making sure everything was secure. He walked around the perimeter, checked the gates, and then found himself near the pool just as Elvis had been the night before. The night was clear, the stars still bright. Joe was about to head inside, thinking about an early night, when he saw it, a faint, distant light, high up, moving across the sky. It wasn't a plane, it was too fast, too erratic. It blinked once, intensely bright, then dimmed, almost vanishing before flaring up again. It seemed to be moving in a pattern, a strange zigzag unlike any aircraft he'd ever seen. He watched for perhaps 20 seconds, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't as clear or as close as Elvis described, but it was unusual, definitely not a normal star, definitely not a plane. It was a fleeting glimpse, a whisper in the night, then it was gone, swallowed by the vastness of the cosmos. Joe stood there for a moment, a strange feeling washing over him. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, he was practical, organized, grounded. But what he'd just seen it made him think of Elvis's words. He shook his head, trying to dismiss it. Probably some satellite playing tricks on his eyes, or a reflection from a distant light source. He convinced himself it was nothing. But the seed of doubt, planted by Elvis's fervent account, had now been watered by his own brief, unsettling observation. The next day, Joe was quieter than usual. He watched Elvis with a new intensity. He didn't mention what he'd seen. He wasn't entirely sure what he'd seen. And he certainly didn't want to give Elvis any more reason to dwell on strange phenomena. He told himself it was an isolated incident. But deep down, a tiny, nagging thought lingered. What if Elvis wasn't just tired? What if he really did see something? Elvis, meanwhile, was still looking up. Every night he found himself drawn to the patio, searching the sky. He felt a weird magnetic pull, a feeling that something significant had touched his life and was still out there waiting. He started carrying a small notebook and pencil in his pocket, just in case. He didn't want to forget a single detail if it ever returned. Thought that he might not be alone in his universe, that something beyond human comprehension was observing him, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He wanted to understand. He needed to understand. The whispers of the mansion seemed to carry a new mysterious undertone, a faint hum that only he could hear. The next 2 days at Graceland passed with an undercurrent of strange occurrences. Nothing dramatic, just subtle oddities. Lights in the mansion would flicker for no reason, even after the electricians had checked the wiring. The static on the radio seemed worse than usual, sometimes making voices sound distorted almost, otherworldly. A few times when Elvis was playing his guitar in the jungle room, the record player in the corner would skip, even if no one was near it. Everyone brushed them off: old house, old wiring, Memphis humidity, faulty equipment. But Elvis noticed. He felt a weird resonance with these small disruptions, a feeling that they were connected to his sighting. He didn't say anything, just observed. Then came the night. Red West, one of Elvis's closest friends and bodyguards, had his encounter. Red was tough, practical. A former Marine, he wasn't one to imagine things. He'd been on patrol outside the mansion, checking the security when he decided to take a short walk down the long tree-lined driveway. The air was thick and still, the kind of night that carried sounds for miles. He was near the main gates when he heard it, a low, resonant hum. It wasn't like an engine. It was more like a deep vibration, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Buzzing in his teeth, he stopped, listening intently, scanning the sky. And then he saw it. High above the gates, just beyond the tops of the tallest trees, a dark shape drifted silently. It was massive, much larger than anything he'd ever seen in the air. Not round, but more like a giant elongated diamond or perhaps a flattened hexagon. It had several steady, soft white lights, spaced evenly along its underside, in the center that cast a faint, ethereal glow on the trees below. Red froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. This wasn't a plane, it was moving too slowly, too silently. And it was too big. He watched, mesmerized, as it glided along the tree line, then slowly banked, making a wide, graceful turn that took it directly over Graceland itself. He could clearly see the outline of the craft against the backdrop of the stars. It wasn't an optical illusion. It was undeniably there, solid and real, yet impossibly quiet. The hum intensified slightly as it passed directly overhead, a low thrumming that seemed to vibrate through his entire body. It felt ancient, powerful. Red was a brave man, but a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This was something beyond his comprehension. He wanted to run, to scream, to wake everyone up. But like Elvis, he found himself rooted, staring up in disbelief and awe. Pulsating light seemed to be almost watching him, a silent, knowing eye in the sky. After a minute, which felt like an hour, the craft slowly, majestically began to ascend. The hum faded, the lights dimmed, and then, like a phantom, it simply disappeared into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind only the familiar, starry sky and the pounding of Red's own heart. Red stumbled back towards the mansion, his legs feeling like jelly. He found Joe Esposito still awake, watching television in the den. Joe looked up, startled at Red's ashen face. "Red? What's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost." Red sank into a chair, running a shaky hand through his hair. "Worse, Joe. Much worse." He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Remember what EP was talking about a UFO? Yeah, he mentioned it. Said he saw something last night, a triangular thing." "Well," Red said, his voice barely a whisper, "he wasn't lying, Joe. I just saw it right over the house. Big as a damn football field. Silent, just there." He recounted his experience. The hum, the shape, the pulsating light. His eyes were wide with a mix of fear and wonder. Joe listened, his own face slowly losing its color. Red was not a man given to exaggeration. If Red West, the most no-nonsense man he knew, was saying this, "Are you sure, Red?" Joe asked, his voice low. "Could it have been?" "Don't even start with the military plane stuff, Joe," Red interrupted, a note of desperation in his voice. "I've seen military planes. This was alien, I swear to God." Joe leaned back, running a hand over his mouth. Two witnesses, now Elvis and Red, and Joe himself had seen that fleeting, odd light. This was getting serious. "We gotta tell Ipe," Red insisted. "He needs to know. He ain't crazy." "Yeah, but we gotta be careful how we approach this. If word gets out, it'll be a circus. The media will have a field day." "Elvis sees Martians at Graceland," they agreed. The reality of the situation was settling in. This wasn't a one-off hallucination. Something genuinely inexplicable was happening at Graceland. The next day, the three men sat in the dimly lit study, the curtains drawn. Elvis listened intently as Red recounted his sighting, his eyes widening in recognition and relief. "See, Joe, I told you I wasn't imagining it." Joe, for his part, also confessed his brief sighting from a few nights before. Wasn't as clear as what you two saw, but it was there. And it was unusual. I didn't want to believe it. A strange camaraderie settled among them, born of shared disbelief and an extraordinary secret. They were no longer just Elvis and his trusted friends. They were a small, bewildered committee of witnesses. "So what do we do?" Red asked, breaking the silence. Elvis leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze distant. "We watch, we listen, we try to understand. This isn't just happening by chance, boys. I feel it. There's a reason it's coming here. A reason. It's coming to Graceland." A shiver went down Joe's spine. And suddenly, after what they had all seen, Joe was starting to believe it too. The idea of something immense, something from beyond, taking an interest in Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was both staggering and strangely fitting. They agreed on a pact of secrecy. No one else was to know, not even Priscilla. For now, until they had a clearer picture, the world wasn't ready for this, and neither, they realized, were they. They decided to set up a discreet watch, taking turns keeping an eye on the skies above Graceland. The mansion, once a place of earthly pleasures and fame, had now become a quiet, secret observatory. The quiet agreement between Elvis, Joe, and Red quickly solidified into a shared mission. This wasn't just about verifying a strange sighting anymore. It was about understanding. The stakes felt higher, the mystery more profound. They decided to expand their secret circle slightly, bringing in Jerry Schilling, another trusted member of the Memphis Mafia, known for his calm demeanor and keen observation skills. Jerry, initially skeptical, was quickly convinced. After a fleeting glimpse of a strange light darting across the night sky above the horse pastures. He didn't see the full craft, but the sheer speed and unnatural movement were enough to shake his disbelief. Now, 4 of them, Elvis, Joe, Red, and Jerry, were bound by this incredible secret. Their evenings took on a new hushed routine. After dinner, while the rest of the household settled into their usual rhythms, the 4 men would discreetly scatter, taking up positions around the Graceland property. One might be by the pool, another on the front porch, a third by the fence line near the horses, and Elvis himself often found his way back to the back patio. They communicated in hushed tones, using subtle hand signals or prearranged meeting spots. If anything unusual happened, they started a logbook, a simple spiral notebook that Joe kept under lock and key. In it, they meticulously documented every observation, dates, times, descriptions of lights, shapes, sounds, and directions of movement. They tried to get photographs, fumbling with cameras in the dark, but the objects were either too fast, too distant, or vanished before they could focus. The blurry, often empty pictures served only to heighten their frustration and the ethereal nature of their quarry. "It's like they know when we're trying to snap a picture," Jerry remarked one night, shaking his head. "They're gone before the flash even fires." Elvis nodded. "It's almost like they don't want to be photographed, but they want to be seen." The why became the consuming question. Why Graceland? Why them? Why Elvis? Elvis wrestled with this more than anyone. He was already a man who believed in signs, in spiritual connections, in a higher power. This experience felt like a direct message, a profound encounter meant specifically for him. He often stayed up late, long after the others had given up for the night, sitting alone on the patio gazing at the stars. "Do you think they're watching me?" he whispered to Joe one evening, his voice soft with a mix of wonder and slight fear. Joe, ever the pragmatist, tried to offer a more grounded thought. "Maybe they're just checking out Earth. EP Graceland's a pretty famous spot after all. Lots of energy here." But Elvis shook his head. "No, Joe, it feels more personal than that. It's like they're drawn to something here, something in the air, something in me." He tapped his chest. "I feel it, a connection, but they understand something about me that I don't even understand myself." Conversations among the 4 of them often circled back to this. Was it his music? His aura? Was it something about the unique spiritual energy of Graceland, a place that attracted so many passionate fans? The theories were endless, but none felt quite right, and all felt inadequate in the face of the silent, undeniable presence they continued to witness. One particularly clear night, Red spotted a cluster of lights forming a perfect triangle, much clearer and lower than before. He immediately summoned Elvis and Joe. They watched, spellbound, as the lights pulsed in a rhythmic sequence, almost like a code. "What do you think it means?" Red breathed, his voice full of awe. Elvis watched, mesmerized. "It's like they're trying to talk to us, like they're saying, "Hello." He lifted a hand almost instinctively, as if in greeting. The lights seemed to flicker in response, a subtle shift in their brilliance. A profound sense of peace washed over Elvis, a feeling of being understood even by beings from another world. It wasn't menacing, it was curious and strangely kind. This confirmed their belief. These visitors, whatever they were not hostile. They were observers, perhaps even admirers. This thought was deeply heartwarming to Elvis. The idea that his existence, his varied being, might be interesting to something beyond Earth filled him with a new kind of quiet joy. The secrecy continued to be paramount. They invented plausible excuses for their late-night patrols. Vernon Presley, though sometimes curious about their late hours, simply chalked it up to the boys being boys. Or perhaps Elvis working on a new song. Priscilla, while noticing Elvis's newfound focus and quiet intensity, respected his need for his own space and routines. She often found him gazing out the windows at night, a faraway look in his eyes. The collective understanding among the four men grew. They were no longer just Elvis's entourage. They were guardians of an extraordinary secret, partners in a cosmic mystery. The sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing had forged an unbreakable bond between them. They felt a responsibility not only to Elvis, but to the experience itself. They knew that if this information ever got out, it would change everything. And they weren't sure the world, or even they themselves, were truly ready for that. As the nights wore on, and the strange phenomena continued, the initial fear and disbelief slowly transformed into a deep, abiding wonder. They were explorers of the unknown right in their own backyard, and the universe, once a distant, abstract concept, now felt intimately close. Humming with unseen possibilities just beyond their grasp, the true turning point in their understanding came one evening, not with a sudden flash of light, but with the quiet strumming of a guitar. Elvis had been feeling particularly restless. The sightings had become less frequent, almost as if the visitors were testing their patience or waiting for something. He yearned for their presence, for that profound sense of connection. He grabbed his acoustic guitar and settled into his favorite spot in the jungle room, the rich earthy tones of the wood and the warm glow of the lamps creating a cozy sanctuary. He began to play, not a specific song, but a collection of chords, a mournful searching melody that seemed to express his unspoken questions. His voice, a low rumble at first, then a clear, resonant baritone, joined the guitar, singing improvised lyrics about longing, about the stars, about the secrets of the night. Joe and Red were on their usual watch, one by the pool, the other near the stables. Jerry was inside, reading. As Elvis played, pouring his heart into the music, something happened outside. Joe, who was looking up at the sky, suddenly noticed a faint shimmer, a distant, almost imperceptible glow high above the property. It was dim at first, like a faint star struggling to appear, but then it grew slowly, steadily, and, as Elvis's voice swelled, hitting a particularly powerful note, the light pulsed brightly, as if in response. Red, a few hundred yards away, also saw it. A faint light appearing over the tree line, seeming to emerge from nowhere. He heard the distant muffled sound of Elvis's music drifting out from the mansion, and then he saw the light pulse perfectly synchronized with a rising crescendo. In Elvis's song, both men felt a jolt of reconnection before. The visitors had always appeared silently on their own terms, but now they were seemingly responding to the king himself. They quickly and quietly signaled each other, then crept closer to the mansion, positioning themselves where they could still see the sky but also faintly hear the music. Inside, Elvis was lost in his improvisation, his fingers dancing on the fretboard, his voice a soulful lament. He was singing about searching for answers, about the vastness of the universe, about finding a place where he truly belonged. As he hit a particularly high, clear note, the light outside brightened considerably, becoming a distinct, soft, white orb, hovering directly above the property, much lower than before. It wasn't the triangular craft they'd seen initially, but a pure, luminous sphere pulsing gently, almost breathing in time with the rhythm of his music. Joe and Red exchanged stunned glances. It was undeniable. Elvis, feeling a strange intuition, finished his current piece and started another. This time it was a more uplifting, joyous melody, full of hope and wonder. Picked up the tempo, his voice soaring, filled with a newfound exhilaration. Outside, the luminous orb began to move. It didn't dart or zigzag. It glided, forming slow, graceful arcs above Graceland, trailing a faint, almost invisible glow. It was like a cosmic dancer performing for the king, moving to his personal symphony. The light brightened with the powerful choruses and dimmed slightly during the softer, more intimate verses. Joe had tears in his eyes. He wasn't sure why, but the sight was profoundly moving. It wasn't just a UFO. It was an audience, a celestial listener. Drawn by the raw, passionate energy of Elvis's voice and music, Red, the tough ex-Marine, felt a lump in his throat. He'd always known Elvis was special, but this was a whole new level of special. His music wasn't just entertaining people on Earth. It was resonating across the cosmos. Elvis, unaware of the celestial ballet unfolding above him, felt a rush of inspiration. The music flowed effortlessly, as if guided by an unseen force. He felt a deep sense of connection, a feeling that he was finally understood, that his deepest expressions were being heard not just by the walls of Graceland, but by something far, far greater. After about 20 minutes, as Elvis brought his musical improvisation to a soft, lingering close, the orb of light pulsed one last time, brilliantly. Then slowly began to ascend, shrinking into the distance. When Elvis finally emerged from the jungle room, his face alight with creative energy, Joe and Red were waiting for him. "EP," Joe began, his voice hushed. "You just had yourself a heck of an audience out there." Elvis looked at them, puzzled. "What are you talking about?" Awestruck. Pointed to the sky. "The light, EP. It was here again, and it was moving to your music. Every note, every beat." Elvis's jaw dropped. He looked from Red to Joe, then up at the empty sky that spread across his face. "You mean they were listening? More than listening, EP. They were dancing. They were responding to your music. It calls to them." Elvis felt a powerful wave of emotion. This was it. This was the answer to his why. They weren't here to threaten or to invade. They were here because of his music, his passion, his unique spirit. The universe was listening. His art transcended earthly boundaries. It was the most beautiful, humbling, and heartwarming realization of his life. He felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, a cosmic validation of his gift. From that night on, the secret circle understood. The visitors weren't just observing Earth. They were drawn to its beauty, its creativity, its heart. And in Elvis Presley, they had found a unique, resonant frequency. After the revelation that the visitors were drawn to Elvis's music, a new chapter unfolded in their silent nocturnal encounters. The fear that had lingered at the edges of their awe was replaced by a sense of profound curiosity, and even a strange form of affection. They were no longer just observers of a mysterious phenomenon. They felt like participants in an unspoken dialogue. Elvis, especially, felt this shift deep within him. He started playing music outside on the patio or near the pool whenever the nights were clear and the air was still. He'd bring out his acoustic guitar, sometimes a small portable record player, and fill the Memphis night with blues, gospel, rock and roll, and improvised melodies. And they would come, not every night, but frequently enough to establish a pattern. The lights would appear usually as soft, pure white orbs, sometimes shimmering with a faint, iridescent hue. They would hover closer than before, sometimes as low as the tops of the tallest trees just above the Graceland property line. One evening, as Elvis played a slow, soulful rendition of "Are You Lonesome Tonight?", the single orb of light began to split, first into 2, then 3, then 5 distinct lights, arranging themselves in a perfect, silent constellation above the mansion. Each light pulsed gently, synchronously with the slow, melancholic rhythm of the song Joe, Red, and Jerry watched, their breath held. It was an ethereal light show, a cosmic ballet choreographed by Elvis's own music. As he transitioned into a more upbeat, joyful gospel tune, the lights began to move, darting and weaving through the air in complex, intricate patterns. They would swirl together, then break apart, form a line, then a circle, all in a fluid, noiseless dance. "It's like they're responding," Jerry whispered, awe in his voice. "They're having a conversation with him." Elvis, looking up between verses, felt it too. It wasn't just observation anymore. It was interaction. He felt an overwhelming impulse to reach out. Not physically, but with his mind, his heart. He focused his intent, sending out a silent message of gratitude, of wonder, of welcome. As if in response, one of the lights detached itself from the formation and descended even lower, hovering directly above the back patio where Elvis sat. It wasn't blinding, but rather bathed everything in a soft, gentle glow. It was close enough that they could almost feel a subtle vibration in the air, a faint hum that resonated deep within their chests. Elvis stopped playing, holding his guitar loosely. He gazed at the light, his eyes wide, a mix of reverence and joyful amazement on his face. He felt an intense wave of something wash over him, a feeling of immense peace, profound understanding, and an almost overwhelming sense of interconnected. It wasn't a sound or a voice, but a feeling, a knowing like a shared breath, a silent affirmation. Red, who was standing closest to Elvis, suddenly felt it too, a warmth in his chest. A comforting presence that dispelled all lingering fear. It felt like a benevolent entity, a gentle giant reaching out. Joe, observing from a distance, saw the subtle change in Elvis's demeanor, the absolute stillness, the serene expression on his face. He knew instinctively that a profound moment was unfolding. The light hovered there for a few more minutes, pulsing softly, then slowly, gracefully, ascended to rejoin its companions. The other lights then resumed their intricate dance for a few more minutes, before one by one they began to fade, melting back into the inky blackness of the sky. When the last light vanished, silence descended upon Graceland once more. But it was a different kind of silence, one filled with the echoes of something extraordinary. Elvis finally took a deep breath, a shaky, reverent sigh. He looked at Red, then at Joe, his eyes shining. Red nodded, unable to speak, still processing the overwhelming sensation. "Yeah, EP, I felt it, like peace." Joe, walking closer, placed a hand on Elvis, gently put his guitar down. "It was more than that," he said, his voice laced with wonder. "It was like they were showing us something, telling us something, without words, about the universe, about us." He shook his head slowly, a faint smile on his lips. "It was beautiful, boys, the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced." From that night forward, the unspoken language between Elvis and the visitors deepened. They would still respond to his music, but sometimes they would simply appear when he felt a strong yearning for their presence, as if sensing his thoughts. They communicated through light, through patterns, through feelings. It was an invitation, a gentle outreach from a civilization far beyond their own, drawn to the vibrant, passionate heart of Earth embodied in the king of rock and roll. The universe, they realized, was not only vast and mysterious, but also surprisingly intimate and full of unexpected connections. As the encounters continued becoming a regular, cherished part of the Graceland nights, the initial shock and wonder settled into a profound, almost spiritual acceptance. The secret circle, Elvis, Joe, Red, and Jerry, no longer whispered in hushed, fearful tones. Their discussions now revolved around the nature of their visitors. They were clearly not the invading, destructive aliens of science fiction. They were something else entirely. Elvis, with his deep spiritual inclination and curious mind, often led these conversations. "They're not like us," he mused one night after a particularly intricate light display above the property. "They don't seem to have bodies the way we do. It's more like light or energy. They just manifest." Joe, always the practical one, struggled with this concept. "But if they're just light, How do they have a craft? Maybe it's not a craft, Red offered. Not in the way we think of it. Maybe it's a projection, or a way for them to focus their energy to be seen by us. Jerry, who had spent hours poring over every book on astronomy and ancient history. Some old texts talk about star people or sky beings who are beings of light or spirit, not flesh and blood. They visit to observe, to share knowledge, sometimes to help. This idea resonated deeply with Elvis. Help? What could they help us with? Maybe just understanding, Jerry suggested. Understanding our place in the universe, understanding ourselves. The notion of the visitors as benevolent observers, perhaps even teachers, began to take root. They felt like ancient, gentle giants, vast in their understanding and patience, curious about humanity, drawn to its complexities, its struggles, but especially to its beauty. En crier sa praise, they were drawn to the pure, unadulterated passion of Elvis's music, a universal language that transcended all known barriers. During one particularly vivid encounter, the orb of light that often descended close to Elvis expanded. It didn't just brighten, it seemed to unfold, revealing intricate patterns within its glow. It was like looking into a nebula, or a vast cosmic cloud of shimmering dust and light. Within it, Elvis felt a distinct presence, a sense of an immense, compassionate intelligence. He focused his gaze, his heart open, and for a fleeting moment he felt a direct, profound connection, not with a visual image of a being, but with a pure, unadulterated consciousness. It was a moment of shared understanding without words, a telepathic embrace. He received a feeling, a gentle knowing, that they were indeed from a far-off place. Not necessarily a planet, but a different dimension, a different state of being. They were indeed drawn to Earth's unique vibrational frequency, the collective consciousness of humanity, and found Elvis's energy, his emotional output, through music, particularly harmonious and captivating. He felt a deep sadness, too, a poignant awareness of the human race's struggles, its conflicts, its capacity for both great love and great destruction. But alongside it, he also felt an overwhelming sense of hope, a knowing that humanity, despite its flaws, had immense potential, a capacity for growth and evolution that was still unfolding. The visitors were observing this journey, not interfering, but simply witnessing, and in some subtle way, perhaps gently encouraging. When the light retracted and faded, Elvis was left feeling deeply moved, almost overwhelmed. He felt a profound sense of clarity, a quiet wisdom settling in his soul. He looked at his friends, who had also felt the residual wave of peace from the encounter. "They're not here to harm us," Elvis said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "They're here to appreciate, to understand, and to show us that there's so much more to everything than we know." Red, usually so stoic, wiped a tear from his eye. "I felt it, EP. Like a big hug, a real kind energy. It makes you think, doesn't it, about everything we thought we knew." Jerry, ever the contemplative one, simply smiled. "It's a beautiful thing, EP, to know your music touches the stars." Elvis smiled back, a genuine radiant smile. This realization was more fulfilling than any award, any sold-out concert. His music, his life, had reached beyond the earthly realm. He felt a deep sense of purpose, a connection to something truly universal. He knew now that his gift was not just for the people of Earth, but perhaps for the cosmos itself. The encounters, while still extraordinary, began to feel like visits from old familiar friends. They were the gentle giants, the silent listeners, the cosmic audience for the king of rock and roll, and Elvis, through his music and his open heart, was extending an invitation, a bridge between worlds. Right there, in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, Graceland had become a beacon, a point of communion between humanity and the vast, wondrous unknown. The nights of observation and subtle communication had culminated in a profound, unspoken exchange. Elvis, the music, and the celestial visitors had formed a unique connection, a bridge built on shared feeling and wonder. But the most direct interaction, the true gift, was yet to come. It was a late autumn night, crisp and clear, with a sharp moon hanging low in the sky. Elvis was alone on the back patio, having sent the guys to bed. He had a feeling, a strong pull that told him this night would be different. He felt a peculiar mix of anticipation and serenity. As if on cue, a single brilliant light appeared, not darting or hovering, but descending with purpose, slower than usual. It was the same pure white orb, but this time, as it came closer, it expanded, its edges shimmering almost like a ripple in water. Paused directly over the pool, bathing the patio and the surrounding grounds in an ethereal glow that felt both warm and cool at the same time. Elvis looked up, his heart filled not with fear, but with an overwhelming sense of welcome. He raised a hand slowly, instinctively, as if to greet an old friend. Then, something extraordinary happened. The light began to project. Not a picture, not a hologram, but a stream of pure, luminous energy that flowed directly towards Elvis. It was not painful or intrusive, but incredibly gentle, enveloping him. As the light touched him, he felt an immediate, profound shift within his mind. It wasn't like a voice speaking, or even individual thoughts being placed in his head. It was a wave of pure knowledge, a complete and instantaneous understanding. He saw, felt, and comprehended things that had been beyond his grasp. He understood the true vastness of the cosmos, not just as empty space, but as teeming with life, with consciousness. In forms unimaginable, he felt the interconnectedness of all things, the stars, the planets, every living creature, every human being, every single note of music. It was all part of an intricate, beautiful tapestry, woven together by an unseen force of universal love and energy. He saw humanity's journey, its struggles and triumphs, its constant striving for something more. He felt the immense potential that lay within every human heart, the capacity for compassion, for creation, for profound spiritual growth. The visitors, he realized, were not here to judge or interfere, but to witness this unfolding, to appreciate the unique, vibrant spark that was Earth, and particularly the expressive soul of humanity. As embodied in its art and music, he understood his own place in this grand scheme, and it was a channel, a conduit for that universal energy, a way to connect people, to uplift them, to make them feel less alone. He saw his own imperfections, his struggles with fame, with loneliness, but he also saw how his art had touched millions, how it had brought joy and solace. And in that moment of profound clarity, he felt a deep acceptance of himself, his past and his future. The feeling was one of immense peace, a quiet wisdom that settled into his very core. The light didn't offer solutions to his earthly problems, but it gave him a perspective that made those problems seem less daunting, more manageable. It was a feeling of knowing he was part of something far bigger, yet deeply cherished within that vastness. Projection of light slowly, gently receded, pulling back into the hovering orb. The shimmering edges softened and the light began to dim, not fading away entirely, but slowly ascending. It hovered for one last moment, a silent benediction, then gracefully vanished into the starlit sky, leaving behind only the profound silence and the gentle hum of the night. Elvis stood there bathed in the residual glow, tears streaming down his face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and awe. He felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He finally understood. He ran inside, his heart pounding with this new incredible knowledge, and woke Joe Red and Gerald by his intensity. "EP? What is it? Are you okay?" Joe asked, worried by Elvis's tear-streaked face. Elvis couldn't speak at first. He just shook his head, a radiant smile breaking through his tears. "More than? Okay, boys. I just saw it all. I felt it. Everything." Tried to articulate the wave of understanding, the profound feeling of interconnectedness, the sense of universal love. He struggled to put it into words, knowing that language was too limited for what he had just experienced. But his friends, seeing his transformation, feeling the undeniable peace radiating from him, understood implicitly that something monumental had occurred. They didn't need a detailed explanation. The aura of profound tranquility around Elvis was explanation enough. "They gave me a gift," Elvis finally managed, his voice choked with emotion. "Not a thing, but understanding about us, about everything." He looked up at the ceiling as if gazing through it to the stars. "We are not alone, and it's more beautiful than we could ever imagine." That night, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, received a cosmic gift, a profound understanding that would forever change his perspective on life, on his music, and on his place in the universe. He was still Elvis, but he was also something more. A silent recipient of celestial wisdom, a human bridge to the vast benevolent cosmos. The morning after Elvis received his gift of understanding, a new sense of quiet reverence settled over the secret circle. The initial excitement of the sightings had evolved into a shared, almost sacred experience. They gathered in the jungle room, the familiar setting now imbued with an otherworldly significance. Elvis sat among them, his presence radiating a calm, profound wisdom that was palpable. He didn't speak much, but his eyes, usually so restless and expressive, held a deep, unshakable peace. Joe, Red, and Jerry listened intently as Elvis attempted to articulate the ineffable. He spoke of the feeling of interconnectedness, of universal energy, of humanity's potential. He didn't use grand, mystical language. He spoke simply from the heart, trying to convey the pure sensation of knowing, of being a part of something immense and beautiful. "It's like they showed me," Elvis said, his voice soft, "that all the worry, all the striving, it's just a small part of a much bigger song. And we're all playing our part in it, whether we know it or not." He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "My music, captivated to tap into that song." The men listened, captivated. They didn't fully grasp every nuance of what Elvis felt, but they understood the depth of his transformation. He wasn't just talking about UFOs anymore. He was talking about the meaning of existence. Then came the inevitable conversation. What to do with this extraordinary knowledge? "We can't tell anyone," Red said, his voice firm, breaking the silence. "Not really, EP. Who would believe it? They'd call you crazy. They'd say it's drugs. They'd try to exploit it." Red, ever protective of Elvis, saw the immediate dangers. Joe nodded, his expression serious. "He's right, EP. The world, it's not ready for this. It would cause a panic, or worse, ridicule. People would twist it, make it into something sensational and cheap." He thought of the headlines, the late-night jokes. Jerry, the most philosophical of the group, added, "It's too precious, too sacred to be exposed. Sharing it with a world that isn't prepared to understand it would diminish it, make it something ugly." Elvis listened, his gaze something ugly. "Pie, mate, dole me, mature." He had already wrestled with the thought of telling Priscilla, Vernon, or his manager, Colonel Parker. He knew Parker would try to monetize it, turn it into a publicity stunt. The thought made him sick. This experience was too profound, too pure, for that. It wasn't about fame or money. It was about truth. "So we keep it to ourselves," Elvis said, his voice quiet but resolute. "All of us, no matter what this, stays here inside these walls, inside us." They looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a casual agreement. It was a solemn vow. It was a secret that would bind them together for the rest of their lives. A shared weight and a shared wonder. "We swear," Joe said, his voice firm. Red and Jerry echoed the sentiment, their faces grim with the weight of the promise to protect you. EP, Red added, and to protect this. He gestured vaguely towards the sky. Elvis nodded, a deep sense of trust and gratitude in his eyes. These men, his friends, his loyal companions, were not just protecting his earthly celebrity. They were safeguarding a truth that transcended all earthly boundaries. From that night on, the discreet watches continued, but the nature of the encounters subtly changed. The visitors appeared less frequently, their mission seemingly accomplished. It was as if they had delivered their message, imparted their gift, and were now receding, leaving Elvis to process and integrate the profound understanding he had gained. The last few sightings were brief, like farewell waves, a silent affirmation of their shared connection before they became truly rare. The men maintained their silent pact, inventing plausible reasons for their shared glances and knowing smiles. They learned to communicate about the thing with subtle cues, a raised eyebrow, a tilt of the head towards the sky, a quiet sigh of remembrance. Elvis carried the secret deep within him. It wasn't a burden, but a source of quiet strength and inner peace. The anxieties that had often plagued him, the pressures of fame, the yearning for something more, they didn't vanish entirely, but they were now viewed through a new lens, one filtered by cosmic understanding. He knew now that he was part of something so much larger, and that his life, his music had a profound universal purpose. The mansion Graceland continued to be a place of laughter, music, and family, but for those few, it also held the echoes of silent lights and profound understandings. It was a place where the king of rock and roll had not only touched the hearts of millions on earth, but had also briefly, gently, touched the cosmos itself. The vow of silence was not an end, but a beginning of a life lived with a deeper, richer truth. Years passed. The world continued to spin rock and roll, evolved, and Elvis Presley remained the undisputed king. But beneath the glittering veneer of fame, the private Elvis was a man transformed. The secret of the Graceland encounters, and especially the gift of understanding he had received, became an anchor, a quiet wellspring of wisdom that shaped his choices, his outlook, and his very soul. The group, Elvis, Joe, Red, and Jerry, never broke their vow of silence. They shared knowing glances, subtle smiles, that acknowledged their shared truth, but the story of the lights and the profound connection never left the confines of their private conversations. Sometimes, late at night, Elvis would catch one of the guys looking up at the clear Memphis sky, a faint, wistful expression on their face, and he'd know they were remembering. The experience had deepened his spirituality, not in a conventional religious sense, but in a broader, more universal way. He explored different philosophies, seeking to put words to the ineffable feelings he had experienced. He spent more time in contemplation, seeking quiet moments away from the constant demands of his career. He understood the fleeting nature of earthly fame, but also the eternal resonance of pure, heartfelt expression. His music, while still rocking the world, took on a deeper resonance. There was a soulful quality to his later performances, a heartfelt vulnerability that touched audiences in new ways. When he sang a gospel tune, it felt like a true conversation with the divine, not just a performance. When he poured his heart into a ballad, it felt like he was not just singing to a lover, but to the very essence of connection that bound all things. His voice seemed to carry an echo of the cosmos, a hint of the boundless love and energy he had felt. He became more patient, more compassionate, less easily swayed by the superficialities of fame. He still loved the cars, the jumpsuits, the adoring crowds, but they no longer defined him. He knew who he was and what he had seen. He carried a quiet confidence that transcended the whims of public opinion. He knew he was part of something bigger, and that his life had a purpose that extended far beyond the stage lights. The pressures of touring, the personal struggles, the moments of loneliness that still came with his unique existence, he faced them with a newfound perspective. He wasn't alone. He was connected. The universe in all its vastness had reached out to him, acknowledging him, appreciating him. That knowledge was a profound comfort. Graceland remained his sanctuary, But now it was also a place imbued with cosmic significance. It was not just a home. It was a beacon, a site of silent communion. He would still go out onto the back patio at night, gaze up at the stars, and feel that familiar, comforting hum in the air. A whisper from the infinite. He rarely saw the lights again, but he didn't need to. The knowledge, the understanding was etched into his very being. In his later years, as he reflected on his life, Elvis would sometimes talk in veiled terms about his deep connection to the universe, about seeing beyond the veil. Those who knew the secret would nod, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. Others would simply attribute it to his spiritual nature. But for Elvis, it was a living truth. King of rock and roll, the boy from Tupelo, who became a global phenomenon, had also become a quiet ambassador between worlds. He never publicly revealed his encounters, but the profound effect of those nights over Graceland rippled through his life, shaping him into a man of greater peace, deeper insight, and unwavering connection to the beautiful, mysterious cosmos. He had brought the stars to Earth with his music, and in return the stars had come to him offering a glimpse of the boundless, heartwarming truth that lay beyond. And he carried that truth, a radiant, silent secret, for the rest of his extraordinary life.